You're good. You're good.
We want to welcome you to Lessons in Leadership, and I'm Dana Williams, and I'm here with my sidekicks, Micah and H. We come here every 2 weeks and talk about things, a specific topic, and we've been talking about your personal brand over the last month and a half, I think, because we've had so much content. I think last time we only got through one piece of a 4-part piece. So H is going to lead us through that, but we want to introduce ourselves and then we'll hand it over to H. Again, my name is Dana Williams. I have Dana Williams Consulting. I work with leaders and individuals and entrepreneurs and help them really design their day based on their strengths. So I help them transform their lives from the inside out. So many people right now are living their day in default instead of design, and I kind of come in and help with that. I want to kick it off to Micah, and then he'll introduce H.
All right. Thank you, Dana. My name is Micah Lawrence. I am an ICF certified coach and a Gallup certified strengths coach. I work with a lot of startup founders and small business owners and do leadership coaching with them. And I do team development workshops with teams using the Clifton Strengths Assessment. Like we're all Clifton Strengths nerds on in this group, and we can't help but bring it up from time to time. But I just love helping leaders reach their potential and help to build high-performing teams. H, why don't you take it from here?
I'm H. Muir. My business is called Lift Shop. I'm all about giving brands, teams, and organizations a lift. And we'll talk more about what LIFT stands for. And so we've been focused on its personal brand. I'd also say this is leadership brand, which is you could use the exact same templates. And if you're interested in this session and you're interested in taking this to your team, hit us up on LinkedIn and we'll talk about how to do that. But we've done is this our third week, Dana? Third time?
It is our third time, and we want to make sure that you guys please put your comments in the comment section, and we'll be watching that. Mike and I will be watching that as H is leading through the discussion, and we'll be making sure that any questions y'all like to ask throughout the conversation today, we want to make sure we address those. So yes, this is the third one. Yeah.
If I don't pay attention to your questions, it's not because I'm ignoring them, it's because I can't see them.
They can't even see us.
A different view. Gets a different view than we do.
That's right.
So just to refresh where we've been, we talk about the 4 P's of developing your brand, your leadership brand, your personal brand, which align with the 4 P's of marketing. And this is, instead of product, promotion, price, and place, we talk about power, purpose, pitch, and platform. And so we talked about power before, which is really about being anchored in your strengths, your values, and your personality. We talked, and then what are the benefits of those? We talked about your purpose before. It's like, how do your benefits show up to the people, to your target audience, if it's your personal brand, or the people that and business that you lead, if it's your leadership brand. And last time we got to talk about pitch, and your pitch is really, what's the articulation of your brand, right? What do you want your audience to know about you as a leader? And we got there are 4 questions that we focus on, right? If you think as a leader and you're new, or even if you're not, if you're on a team and your colleagues, these are the questions that they want to know. Who are you? What do you value? What can people expect from you? And what do you expect from others? And I've been doing new leader assimilations longer than I care to admit. And when I do this, I coach leaders that in their kickoff with their teams, they should be able to answer these questions for their team. And so we got through the first one. It took all of our session last time. And the first question, really, we spent a lot of time on this. What's my background? How do you articulate that and articulate what I've learned? And I don't know, Dana or Micah, any other thoughts about what we did last time in this particular question?
No, I think that was great. And I think that I love that we're talking about this, especially during transition, because there's a lot of leaders that are transitioning right now, and you can't just jump in and assume everybody knows your brand. They might not even know you. And so I think just you bring all this with you. So with that context in mind, I think this is just so relevant right now. Even though you've been doing it for years, H, it's very relevant right now.
Oh, with all the transitions, yeah. Yeah, Mikey, you were going to say something about this?
Yeah, I was just thinking last time as we were getting into the who, when I first thought about the word pitch, I was making the distinction in my mind that it's not to be confused with elevator pitch. An elevator
Right.
pitch is something that it's just like one statement, 30 seconds, communicate your value. This is not that. This is something where it's like you need to let people in deeply. We need to have
We're
a good amount of discussion around who you are and how to answer these questions. Not so much the term elevator pitch comes up a lot
I
in
will. I'm
this
going to
situation.
stop you
Yeah.
because we're going to get to that. So it's point of view first. This is your point of view that answers those
Yeah.
questions. Well, I'm going to show you your pitch. So how do you synthesize those four questions into that pithy, 30 15
cool.
seconds?
So you get both.
You get
You
both.
have the elevator pitch version, but you also have the expanded pitch. It just the part of the reason it crossed my mind is I thought sometimes I'll bet it's not effective in a kickoff, and maybe you would disagree, H, because you've done this so much, but can you get through all four of these questions, one right after another in one kickoff with your new team? Or is it something that you kind of have to build on over the next few months? Maybe your first 90 days include a lot of these aspects in it.
I tell new team leaders, especially if we do a formal new leader assimilation, you've probably been having this conversation. We're going to formalize it. What do I mean by we're going to put it in a slide? You're going to walk through it, right? And I think especially this first one, my background, it's nice to talk about, here's where I'm from, here's my family, however you define that. Here's what I enjoy doing. Here's what I've learned. And then you segue into the next. So I tell leaders, adult attention span is used to be 19 minutes. I think it's less than that.
Probably.
So you figure about a minute or two a slide. You've got 10 slides is 2 minutes, that's the cutoff. That's the max. Unless you're like me. And I did have one guy, I was in Wisconsin, and he got to the point in this slide, and he had one extra slide because he put up who he rooted for, and he roots for the Dallas Cowboys and all the Packers. Yeah, I knew you all about that. And all the Packers fans. So it was a whole it was kind of a way to jab.
He was like gaslighting.
Yeah. Right.
He was messing with people.
So put some fuel on the fire. So but that's having fun and making it, having a sense of humor about it was good. So
and I think the point here is that we're all unique. And so people don't think that. And I think being able to draw out that story of yourself here is so important because you are unique. And so many times people go, well, I really don't have a story. It's pretty boring. But you do.
And that's why it's talking, what are the safe topics to talk about who you are? And I don't know if we talked about last time, where you're from, your geography, who you consider your family, what's important, what do you do in your free time? And, and then if you're in, and free time also includes what teams or what do you root for, or what do you enjoy doing? Or if you're not into sports, what are you into? I think it makes you relatable and approachable. And frankly, we start with this because in building trust, when you talk about first impressions, and even though you've met your team and you're doing this formally, it's warmth comes before credibility. So this is all about, how do you articulate warmth and build trust? So that's why we start with this slide, this question. Yeah. So this is the second question, right? What do you value? And typically, what you value tends to align with your strengths. And so just be conscious of that. And I think the question I see with a lot of leaders when I'm coaching them is, to your point, Dana, about being specific and unique about what you value, right? And I'll talk about that in a second. But pay attention that you don't just look for strengths, that look for what you value is validation, meaning I value things that are done like I like it. I value, I'm high in ideation and individualism, and so I'm in communication. So pretty creative, strong imagination. So if I only value that, and let's say my execution is my lowest domain. If I don't, I tend to value execution because it's complementary. And I think just being conscious of that, and I like using the domains as a way to talk about that. So that's one thing I think when we talk about what you value, I also find this is my rule is a lot of times when we talk about what we value, it can be, you know, I value mom, apple pie, and baseball, right? It's so generic.
Yeah.
And that's why to be specific and unique, you've got to think about, what is it that you care about, what you pay attention to.
You just made me think of something. I had a conversation with so I'll preface it by saying, I feel like this is an exercise that a leader might, or any professional might fly through really quickly. Oh, here are the things I value, get this out of the way. But I could see this being a really challenging thing to think through, because not only does it need to be worthwhile, mom, apple pie, and what did you say? What was the other thing you said?
Baseball.
Baseball. That's a little too superficial and not really insightful. It's too generic. But also I think there needs to be some alignment with what your organization values. That's what just went through my head, in that I remember having a conversation with my team once where I had a what I value kind of conversation, because I could sense that they were hesitant to try new things and implement ideas that they were coming up with. And so I was very clear, I value innovation. I love experimentation, and I will accept poor performance on something that you've experimented on, because it was an experiment. And it's there's some communication that had to go into what I value in the team. And it led to us trying things that nobody had tried in an industry we were in, that nobody was really innovating in. And I was really proud of that. But I think about the last vice president that I reported to I don't think she valued that. And for her organization, in a strategy and planning organization, that wasn't as important to her as tried and true, do what's expected of you. And thinking back on that experience, I think I let my values, I still think I was right, by the way, but I thought that we did a lot of good. We did a lot of good, but there was a little bit of friction between my values and my department leaders' values. And I think that might be, I don't know, what do y'all think? Does that need to be a part of what goes into thinking through, what do I value that's aligned with my organization or my company as a whole, so that I'm not putting my people in a position to fail because I've communicated values to them that they're modeling that aren't actually aligned with the organization? That just crossed my mind while you were talking, H.
Yeah, I think when we do the exercise of what are your strengths, then what are your core values, and you line those up. And then now what are the core, and this is probably where H is going, where are the values now? What are the values aligned with your company that you have? And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that, Micah? And I think probably what happens is there's different people with different core values based on their strengths and their background and their makeup. So it's just being able to identify, what of my core values attracted me to the mission of this company or the brand. Yeah. And it's making those connections. Well,
can you imagine working in at least in the insurance industry where I came from, there were a lot of regulations, and we had compliance teams. Your job is to be as compliant as possible. Can you imagine me as a leader coming in and being like, all right, let's experiment, let's innovate. And they're like, no, we're not doing that.
Can't do that.
We're being compliant. And anyway, so that just, H, what's your experience in that? Is that something you've encouraged people to do?
I went from the Union Pacific Railroad and trucking, where I cut my teeth managing Teamsters. And then I got into sales, and I was head of sales training. And then I went over to a family company, and they put me in HR for the first time. You can imagine. So I'm very direct, very assertive, business oriented, building relationships with the business. And they're my 8. And I worked for 3 bosses. All had been there 20 years and never worked anywhere else. They were.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was our values and personalities, which is why it's so important to realize it's not just your strengths and your values. Your personality matters too, right? That my assertiveness isn't a value. It's just part of who I am. And I had to watch that. The other thing that this bleeds into that I think are 2 really important questions. Why did you take this job, and why are you here? Which starts to get into the organization's values, and are you here to turn this around? Are you here to build a team and it's a new department, a new team? Is it you're here to, lead a reorg? I mean, I think that's the other question people want to know. And I don't call it out explicitly because answering that question depends on the situation you're in.
Yeah.
And I think it starts to say, why did you take this job? And that should align with your values. And that's kind of a sub point under this. But it's kind of like saying, when you talk about why you take your job, and I like to say, here's what I value, here's why, and here's how it aligns with why I took this job. And then talk about the organizational expectations of taking that job.
Yeah, good. So it's built in there. It's just I hadn't made that connection.
It is. But I don't put that out there like in a larger session. It's one I would coach the individual, and I'd want to understand why they took the job, and frankly, what their ask is, because those could be really those could be discussions you want to have at a follow-up meeting, right? You want to keep this positive and make a warm first impression. And if your job is there to turn around and you took the job because you're a turnaround specialist, that may be a later discussion.
Or what's worse is if you took the job because it pays really well and you're not a turnaround specialist, but that's what they expected. That's where I would do some soul searching. And it's like, do your strengths and values really align with this role? Or are you finding it appealing to get paid more, but setting yourself up for either failure or burnout or, whatever else?
What about, or how about you were on the team and you got promoted over a colleague?
Yeah.
Right? Those are all things that, frankly, this in putting forth your leadership brand, you want it to come from you and talk about you and create warmth and credibility. You have to read the room in order to, and understand the situation in order to say, do I talk about why I took this job and what?
And I think that's piece of, hopefully, that all that got answered in the interview before they join. I would love to ask that question, of course, before somebody comes. But at the same time, what you're bringing up is emotional intelligence and having that good EQ to know when to bring those kind of things up.
So
awesome.
This discussion, when you talk about your value, right? I always tell them, be specific and unique. The greatest way to be specific and unique is to talk about, put a label on it. Here's what I value. I value teamwork. Okay, well, who doesn't? Then tell the story. Tell stories about teams you've built.
That's right.
That's how it brings it to life and makes it relatable.
Yeah.
Right?
Prove it. Show
When
it.
people remember stories, they don't remember, H loves baseball and he ate hot dogs. But oh my gosh, H told the story about how he fell down the bleachers and a hot dog landed in his lap. It's like, it's storytelling, right? There's a problem and there's a solution. So,
I want that to be a real story now. I want that to be true.
I know.
I would be H loves, because I lived in Wisconsin, H loves brats and the Packers.
There we go.
Oh,
but we have to make up a story around that.
I will say that I did get to go in the locker room, see the Lombardi trophy, and run out on the field and be on the Jumbotron.
No way.
There's your story.
Your moment in the sun.
goodness.
There was no crowd. This was in the.
We don't tell everybody that part.
Nobody cares.
So
they don't need to know that.
Yeah.
So one thing that helps, right? I think people in terms is this notion of labeling your values, and I've mentioned this before. It's Martin Seligman, who's like one of the fathers of positive psychology. He wrote a great book called, now I'm going to blow it. Hold on. Authentic Happiness. It's a free assessment called the MVI. Don't ask something value index.
Yeah.
And I think like, if you listen, because I'm going to show you this, like he calls them strengths. I think my values are really my top 5 values: social intelligence, creativity, curiosity, playfulness, love of learning. And then 6 is perspective.
That's cool.
Start to
Because
align with
surprised.
right. And start to align with my strengths of individualization, which is perspective, and social intelligence, ideation, which is all about curiosity and creativity, strategic, a little bit different, relator, and then communication. So you start to see I think that helps you start to tell the story of how all those things work together. So I encourage you. I think it's nice to have, especially when you're building a brand. I think it should be anchored in strength finders, but I also think having other assessments help you become more three-dimensional.
Absolutely.
Love that. I love playfulness. Creativity is in my top 5. But I really like playfulness. I'm gonna think about that. What that means for
see
me.
if this sounds like me. Humor and playfulness. You like to laugh and tease. Bringing smiles to others is important to you. You try to see the light side of all situations.
Yeah,
I love it. It's great.
All right, we have about 10 minutes to do our other 2 questions.
All right.
I'm reminding us this time.
We need to make sure. There you go. Okay, we need to make sure we were moving the slides.
Yeah. We're on question 3. So I think values, and how you articulate that, it gives insight. It also is directional, but I like to make it really concrete and make it behavioral. And the first is, what can you expect from me? And this is like, hey, in the next 30 days, here's my focus. This is what I'm going to say or do. And I also tell them, what's your hot buttons? It's like, what are you looking for? What are you going to measure? What are you going to monitor?
Yeah.
And typically how you do that aligns with your strengths and your personalities, right? Like, one of the things I talk about, what you can expect from me is, I'm going to be observing. I'm going to be, and I like to do 3 things, right? I'm going to be measuring. So I'm going to be looking at the numbers. I'm going to be observing. I'm going to be monitoring, your performance and looking. I'm using my own eyes to talk about how well you're performing. And third, I'm going to get feedback. I'm going to ask our stakeholders that our team interacts with how we're doing as a team. Now, all that said, I'm not into the details. I like top line, right? Show me the baby. I don't care about how you got there. That was a horrible analogy.
Great analogy. That's just
good job, H.
Right to the point.
I don't care about the little ears.
I don't care about the baby.
Sorry.
Wait, what?
Show me the cake. I don't care about the ingredients. How's that?
There we go.
That's a good one.
Okay.
So one way that I've actually, I think I've talked about this with y'all here before, but in case anybody's listening that hasn't heard this, is if you've taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment, I had a document, a 1-pager that I created just in PowerPoint, and then I made it a PDF with my top 10 strengths down the middle. And then on both sides, I had the way my strengths show up in positive ways and the way they show up as blind spots, so that they would know what to expect of me. Like, because of these strengths, here are some of the things that you can expect to see in me, and how oftentimes they help me succeed. But then here are also some things that I want you to look out for that you can expect from me that sometimes hinder my progress or get in the way, or it's a blind spot that I don't always see. And you can complement my strengths with your strengths by helping me in these ways. And it was almost like an invitation to my people to see that this is what you can expect of me, someone with my combination of strengths. And it was built in a little bit of that. I expect you to call me out when I'm doing things that are on this side, or the negative side, or the hinder side of my strengths. And that was actually a really effective tool. It required some humility at first to be like, okay, I'm going to share this with people, and they're going to see these things about myself that aren't always good. But it was a good way to set expectations with them in both directions. This is what you can expect of me, and this is what I would like in return from you.
Yeah. I use similar thing. I talk about here's what's energy building for me. Here's what's energy draining, including my pet peeve.
Oh, I love that.
Here's my blinds. Because the other one is, I call it your bias. There's some things that I get really excited. You start brainstorming with me. I love that. I don't know that that's always a good use of both of our time. My ideation kicks in. The 3 of us have done that on numerous occasions. And I go, okay, given the situation at hand, I need to be conscious of that and say, no, this isn't, that's not what we need to do. We need to talk about how we're executing. We need to talk about getting through all 4 questions.
I know.
We still have 5 minutes. We're good.
I think I have executing higher than y'all. So.
You do.
But that's okay. But I do think there's a time to throw out everything when you're a new leader and you're just meeting, as opposed to when you've already started building relationships, right? So I think there's ways to talk about yourself, because you don't want to get yourself labeled as you're creating your personal brand. You want to be careful. I just throw out that little.
Well, that's why this is so important, right? If you talk about your strengths and your values, those are, you want to label them, but you want this to be in your own words about the things that we just talked about, and make it concrete and tangible. Because just because we say, like when I talked about, hey, I'm high in ideator and I value creativity and ingenuity, how does that manifest itself, right? If I was an introvert, it would be a very different experience than technically I think I'm technically a flaming extrovert. Those and that matters. That's how people experience you. Which is why I'm an external processor. I ideate out loud.
Giving it those verbs, kind of how to describe yourself. I love that.
So the last one, and this kind of gets into, it's also bleeds into a little bit of why I'm here. What do I expect from you? So, behavioral, this is what I'm looking for. Here's milestones or results. So this kind of gets to behavioral. This is what I'm going to observe. Results, this is how I'm keeping score. And you want to be specific, right? Hey, early on, I'm just looking for these things, and give them 3, right? They're already, your team is going to be, especially if you're new, they're going to be in the forming stage. They're going to defer to you. So don't overwhelm them. Give them 3 things that
I like that.
For.
Even if there are more, summarize them in 3.
Yes. Right. Even if there are more, here's my top 3. This is what I'm looking for, certainly in the next 30 days.
Yeah. Dana, do you have a thought?
No, I'm just going to put a underline under that whether you're doing marketing yourself or something else, no more than 3, just always.
The rule of 3.
My rule of 3.
That's my rule for going to the grocery store too. If it's more than 3 things, it's too much.
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
No, if it's more than 3 things, I have to write it down. That's actually my wife and
I's that's rule. True, right? So
we can't hold that many, right?
Well, if you think about it around the world, so this was someone who I used to. He was at Harvard. He did lots of research on influence and persuasion, and that's what he taught at Harvard. And he said, if you look around the world, everybody around the world says, on your mark, get set, go. Everybody on the world says, learn your A, B, C's. Stop signs are go, wait, stop. And so that's the rule of 3.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's like our unconscious. It is what we can remember. I always try and summarize in 3 when I can.
Yeah, it's great. It's just a great kind of guideline for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think in general, this question number 4 aligns really well with the other research that Gallup puts out. I feel like between strengths and engagement, that's where Gallup puts most of their attention, it seems. And of the 12 questions, the engagement questions, the very first one that they say is the most important engagement question to get right is, do I know it's expected of me at work? And it's amazing how many leaders I work with when I'll ask them, how many of your people really know what's in your head? Like, what do you actually expect from them? And leaders struggle with this one. It's hard to articulate outside of the job description that's generic, that everybody reads. What do I really expect of my people? And the better you can articulate this, the more likely your employees will be engaged. And that's what we want. Well,
and to build, Mike, I think we talk in platitudes, right? I expect us to collaborate. I expect us to be a winning team. I expect us to hit our number. I'm like, tell us.
What does that mean? Yeah.
What does that mean? Give us the how, right?
Yeah.
And this is coming from someone who's really low in execution. It is. I have to really force myself to use concrete language.
Yeah.
But it's in headlines that a 3rd grader can understand. It's not just long, big words and lots of sentences and lots. What is it that you really need from me?
Yeah.
And expect from you. I love that.
That's the end of the point of view. Next time we'll talk about how do you take those 4 questions and synthesize it into a pitch. Pitch should be, right? We'll talk about the ABCs, rule of 3, although I did sneak in 2 C's.
You don't have a D there?
Because it's what is that elevator pitch? How do you get from? And I'll show you. I'll show you mine. Here's my strengths. Here's my values, and here's how it ladders into my pitch.
Nice.
And it's how do you make it authentic? How do you make it brief? How does it capture your audience? How does it capture their attention? Right. That's about using the type of language, and then how does it connect, right? Who's your target, and how does it align with what they need? So we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah. I love that, H, and it gives everybody, they have to come back. See, if they don't, you're going to have to come back. It's a teaser. You have to wait. You have to wait like 2 weeks.
We'll share H's, and then we'll like take everybody else through making their own or something like that.
And 2 weeks from today is Labor Day, so we won't be here Labor Day. So it'll probably be the 12th. Yeah.
That works.
All good. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, H, for leading us through this discussion of how to create your pitch. We are, Mike and I are waiting with bated breath to see what your pitch is. So we can't wait to hear.
I think I've talked about it before. It took me a while.
It won't surprise us.
It won't surprise us. Let's just say there's an acronym involved, and there's a metaphor.
Of course.
Involved.
We're not surprised. Okay, so y'all all guess what H's acronym is going to be for his pitch. And whoever guesses right gets some time with H. There we go.
Hey, I like that. A little prize.
All right. Thank you guys for being with us today.
Y'all have a good one.